one. Good morning.
Hey,
How
good
are
morning.
you?
Good to see you, Travis. Hey, this is Travis, and I'm Mike. And
No, you're Mike. I'm
hap-
Travis.
That's right. Did I say that wrong? Oh my God. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. So this is our post-Thanksgiving show. So did anybody notice we had a small hiatus?
I think so. And, it's interesting. Not that we necessarily plan that, but I think when you do volunteer podcasting like we do and you try to keep a regular schedule, obviously life gets in the way. But with a compressed week and trying to get everything else done, I think it obviously worked out to do that. But yeah, I heard from a lot of people, where are you guys? And we kind of teased it a few episodes ago where after the election, are you guys going away? Are you going to do the podcast? And of course we assured everybody that we would. So the Thanksgiving break had nothing to do with that. It was just the holidays, get on the other side of that. And now we're back
Schedules.
with you.
Yeah.
What were you just telling me before we came on about your tooth though? Because if your voice does go out during the podcast and you sound funny, it is still Mike, everyone.
Well, so I had a couple of implants put in over the course of the really right from the beginning of the COVID thing. Just prior to that, I went in and had some oral surgery and had some cadaver bone put in my upper jaw so I could get an implant put in there. That implant that I had put in recently replaces 2 teeth. And so I'm not.
What do you mean? You have one giant tooth?
Yes, on the top. It's one larger than normal tooth. It does feel kind of giant, and I am pretty used to it. And these are the first implants I've ever gotten. Not going to be the last, though.
Now, is this permanent, or are they going to replace that with something else?
No. These are the final deal. So my dentist. I have an oral surgeon, then I have a dentist, and they work together on it. And then split the profits, I guess, because it was.
You're keeping them in business.
So, this implant in the top is slightly larger than the tooth it replaces, because not only is it because it's replacing the tooth behind it, which is gone also. So I won't need an additional tooth on the top, but this tooth is just slightly wider than the teeth that it replaces. So it has happened a few times, and I can't tell if it's getting worse, or I thought I was getting used to it, but over the holiday I bit the holy crap out of my tongue in the back. And once I do that, then it swells up, and then I have a hard time stopping it from happening. So right now, so far so good. But if I do bite my tongue, or sometimes I find it's just a little hard to talk because my tongue gets close to that tooth, and I start to panic.
Well, there's a couple of topics, like would we, discuss the Supreme Court, that I wish you would bite your tongue. But now, are these the same wooden teeth that George Washington had, or what is this?
They are in my endeavor to be politically correct. I'm only using sustainable, replaceable wooden teeth.
Did you add some bling? Any gold? Any diamonds?
Actually, this giant tooth on the top actually replaces a gold tooth that I had prior in there, that I used to have in there. So
now, will you sell that with the price of gold going the way it is?
I kept it. I kept them. I'm thinking there's quite a bit of gold. I have 2 teeth that fell out of my mouth in the years prior to these implants. That's what I'm trying to replace. And my nephew looked into my mouth a couple years ago, and he goes, "Uncle Mike, let me look in your mouth." And he looks in there and he goes, "Wow, you've got gold in your mouth." And I'm like, "That's my retirement plan, buddy." So some of that gold is going to be.
I don't get
some
how
of that
they
gold
would...
is going to be. Yeah, some of that gold is going to be yours someday.
Right? Put it in the will. I don't understand how they do. Why did you get one giant tooth? Why can't they make you 2 teeth to fit what you had? That's, of course, going to change your bite and the way you speak and everything else.
Well, we're only going to do 1 tooth, right? So what I'm trying to achieve is some chewing capability on that side, and I only need 1 tooth to do that. The tooth behind it doesn't really matter. It's all pulled out, so it's not going to matter. The broken part of it. And so this is a lot cheaper. I mean, these bad boys are $5,000 a pop. So
the one that you just had in is $5,000.
Well, The two, actually. There's two, and that includes the surgery. So
Jesus.
this was a little complicated. The bottom went in fine, no problem. You got your bottom jaw, you got a lot of bone there. Just drill a post into it, let it set, screw a tooth onto it, and call it an implant. The top one, a little more difficult. There's not nearly as much bone on the top of your jaw. So sometimes, and very often for people, for them to put the post in that the implant is going to attach to, there's not enough bone, so they have to implant some. This is pretty gross. Some cadaver bone.
So the cadaver bone is where the post is held onto. Is that what it is?
Right. That's where you're going to put the post into the. You're going to put that bone in there so you have more upper bone to put the post into. So that all happened 8 months ago.
What kind of cadaver did you get?
Democrat.
That's your problem. It's in your DNA now.
I don't know. They didn't actually get to select. That was a much more expensive process if you get to select the cadaver.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you select it, you could choose maybe a weaker cadaver. I mean, what do you do? Like, if you get the quail bone, it's cheaper than if you get the hog bone or something like that.
No, these are human bones.
Oh, human bones.
Cadavers,
All
not
right.
animals.
I don't know how it works.
Yeah.
Now, does the cadaver know that they took the bone? Is this from a dead individual?
Yeah, dead. That's the word cadaver, dude. Yeah, it's been fun. So we'll see if you'll know if I bite my tongue during this podcast. You'll hear it. So,
but you've been going through dental work for a while, but you recovered pretty quickly. I'm impressed. You've been dealing with this shit for a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started this process in January, right? I had the surgery in January. I think I wanted to get it done before I went on vacation in the beginning of March. And so, timing is everything. So,
well, I remember you were delayed slightly because you started this before COVID, and then or in the early stages of COVID and shut down. The dentist's office were closed, and you couldn't get in to do some follow-up work.
Yeah, I think it took a little bit longer. I don't think it didn't delay me too much. There's about a 6-month period between doing the surgery, letting it all heal up. There are several follow-up visits. So one of the follow-up visits was delayed because they just weren't open except for emergencies. So yeah, but it's good to be able to chew. Right? That's what I can tell you right now.
Are you juicing more?
No. Juicing? Steroids?
No, not juicing like in your ass.
You mean
drinking juice.
No, I don't drink juice. I like to eat fruit. And here's what I am doing though with the implant, and I have more to go. I have another implant. I'll go next year, which is soon upon us. I will start the process to do another implant on the upper side on the right hand, on my right hand side of my mouth, and then that will give me an adequate amount of place to chew permanently. So right now on the right side, I'm going to have to go through the same process. I think, I don't know, we haven't really looked at it, but I would imagine it's an upper, so I would imagine I'll need to have the cadaver bone implant, that surgery. There's no broken teeth over there to worry about. That's already been taken out. We did that back in January. So put in the cadaver bone, and if I need it, and then start the implant process. So that'll be good. But I am able to eat vegetables better.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I like to eat vegetables. I like them from a health perspective. A few years ago, I tried to significantly cut down the amount of meat I eat, which has been good for my cholesterol and stuff. And not a problem because it was something I wanted to do for a variety of reasons. But then it got hard to chew vegetables of any merit, like broccoli or anything like that. It was hard to chew because I only had one little spot on the right hand side of my mouth where I could chew anything. And so anyway, there's these are the stories of old age that I'm sure our listeners do not
they can relate.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, they're younger as a whole. Yeah, I got some books. I'm going to show this to the camera, but this camera is so weird, you can't see it. Okay, so
it's going in
that
and out.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, what is it?
I got this book, How Democracies Die, just came from Amazon today. And these are some, couple of these books are recommendations from my niece out in Las Vegas. I'll tell you a little bit. I'm going to tell you that story during this podcast. So this is How Democracies Die by Stephen Levitsky, and Daniel Ziblatt. And I haven't read it yet.
Is it a new release?
It's a fairly new release. And, I think the title is pretty self-explanatory. So haven't read it yet.
What do you know about it? Is it was it written during? I mean, obviously during the Trump presidency, and democracies die because we have Trump in office, or is it the other side of that? Do you know?
It's not going to be the other side.
Okay.
Donald Trump's presidency has raised a question that many of us never thought we'd be asking: is our democracy in danger? Harvard professors Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt has spent more than 20 years studying the breakdown of democracies in Europe and Latin America, and they believe the answer is yes. So that's a little bit of the back cover. So it says democracy no longer ends with a bang in a revolution or military coup, but with a whimper, the slow, steady weakening of critical institutions such as the judiciary and the press, and the gradual erosion of longstanding political norms. So these are many topics that this book is going to speak to that I've been interested in worrying about. The other one, I'm sure.
Well, real
about
quick.
this
I mean,
one.
you have to. I don't know where that book is in your personal reading queue, but you got to give us a rundown after you go through it. But do you know, is there a sequel already in the works as far as how democracies will continue to fail once the socialist Democrats get in office? I'm curious if that's in the works yet.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, this book, for all I know, I really don't know much about it. I bought it on a recommendation, and so we'll see. But I think even more important is, I'll try to show it to you.
I see a picture of Trump's face, but I can't read anything.
It's Rage by Bob Woodward.
Okay, yeah. Well, we've referenced that.
Yeah. So I'm excited to read it. Hey, where's the video?
Oh, we're losing you.
Trump just broke my camera.
His face broke your camera.
I just fucked up. Hold on.
Yeah, but that book was. How long was Trump, doing the interview process with Woodward, and it was several months in the making to write that book, and Trump thought it was going to be a book speaking about how great he was and how great of a president he was and all that shit, right?
Yes, this is the book that proves Trump is unqualified to be the president of the United States. The fact that he could have an interview with Bob Woodward and think he was going to come out looking good means that he's too stupid to be the president.
Well, do you think, obviously it's a moot point now because he's gone, but do you think that, Woodward didn't bait him, right? I mean, he was pretty, did he ask?
Hey, Donald, I want to get together, do some interviews with you. I promise you're going to come out looking good. You got on my word, Bob Woodward. Oh, okay. Sounds great. Sounds like a big, beautiful book.
Why would he agree to do that? Why would Trump agree to do that?
Because this is, here's my personal opinion. I'm not going to couch this as facts, but I don't think anybody that's qualified as an expert in this field is probably listening. But if you are, feel free to contact us. I think that the reason why he went down this road with Bob Woodward, which resulted in his own October surprise for the election of Woodward releasing this book, is because of his ego. He's such a narcissistic egomaniac that he thought he could charm.
Don't forget corrupt cocksucker, your go-to favorite.
All of that. Yeah, all of that. He thought he could charm Bob Woodward, maybe the most noted, political author of our lifetime, into writing a book that would make him look good, contrary to all the facts of the situation.
He must have thought
only an incredibly sick narcissist could think that.
Well, I personally think, and I don't know much about the book, and so I'll be curious to see as you go through that as well, but I think for the longest time, as we all know, everything you said about Trump is true, but he pretty much has been relying heavily on the stock market as his report card. That's what he believes is a reflection of his outstanding performance as president. And this goes back obviously before COVID. But I do think that he thought he was going to get high marks in that book. And maybe he thought that it would be the strength of the stock market that would do it. Certainly those comments that we've talked about, and we've played some of those clips on the podcast about where he, knew that COVID was as bad as it turned out to be, but he deliberately downplayed it because he didn't want to start a frenzy. I don't think he ever thought that that was going to turn into anything and come back and bite him, nor do I personally think that that really had any long-term effect on his presidency. I mean, do you? You referenced October Surprise. Do you think that book had a deciding factor in him losing the election?
A deciding effect. I doubt it. I think it had some effect. I'm sure that it was probably the last straw that breaks the fantasy of what and who he is or was or could have been for a lot of people. I think there was a handful of, on the fence people that probably changed their mind after, because it just made it so, it just was such a stark revelation of how silly he is. And here's the thing. I don't know what's in this book. It's a fairly decent sized book. Let me see how big the print is.
Yeah. How many pictures are there?
Pretty big print too. So it's not, these are actual books. My wife is like, these are not paperbacks. I go, yeah, I know. Just get them in, please. We'll see what it says. I think there was a lot of other things in it. The only thing that really got any airtime were his quotes about COVID-19.
Yeah.
And because they made him look like he knowingly kept the truth from the American people for his own benefit to keep the stock market up. And it didn't work. So, yeah,
it could be. I mean, I think the whole point of releasing those sound bites was to say that, it was very political, and it was to say that obviously the person in charge, the leader in the White House, knew that this disease was much worse than he let on. And therefore, this many months later, his lack of leadership is, being exposed, and all the cases and the deaths and blah, blah, blah. And I do think that COVID was probably a big factor in the election. For whatever reason, people seem to think that a Biden victory, this is my own opinion, I don't really know. I haven't seen any of the breakdowns, but we know that Biden won the election, popular vote by a lot, and he won the electoral vote by a lot, no question. And I think the COVID stuff had a lot to do with it. I really do, which is craziness to me. I mean, we've talked about that, and it's just words. It really is no plan. But I think that was a big factor. So did they release the book and those sound bites at that time thinking it was going to have the impact that it did, or did people kind of gravitate and latch onto that? I don't know.
Bob Woodward is a political animal. So I think that the release of the book was probably gauged to produce the biggest sales. And that was probably the single guiding, factor in release time. And I think it's like what comes first, or the chicken or the egg. I think the desire to sell a lot of books means that, hey, you take a book like this and you release it in October, because that's when it's going to have that's when it's going to generate the maximum interest.
Right.
So
why do they call it rage? Do you know?
I don't yet. I think that
because he's a raging maniac.
I believe that. Yeah, I believe that probably what that means is that this group of interviews that he did with Trump probably revealed that to Bob Woodward that there's a rage inside of Donald Trump that is probably. And I haven't read the book yet, so I'm not sure. But another book that was recommended to me that I haven't bought yet, and is the book by his, what is it? Is it his niece, right? Which reveals
Trump's niece.
Yeah, Trump's niece.
And she's not a Trump fan, right?
No, she hates him. And she, so this is the daughter of the brother that recently died, and so. She apparently in that book, you can get some insight into how Trump was raised. And according to the person that I talked to that read it, she can't see how Trump could have turned out any other way than he is after the upbringing that he had. His father, Fred Trump, not really thought of as a, warm kind of guy, kind of a monster in his own right, and produced this monster family, that we know as the Trumps, collectively. And then the third book I got is this one. I think you might find this more interesting. You're not going to be able to see it because of the stupid
What
Zoom
does it say?
thing.
Post-corona?
Post-corona.
All right.
It's probably backwards on your screen, right? This is Post-Corona from Crisis to Opportunity. So this is a business book from Scott Galloway. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Galloway. No. He's an author. He's a professor.
Does he teach at one of these liberal fucking colleges?
Which would be all of them.
Okay. All right. Enough said.
I'm trying to think which one he's at, but I can't remember. Anyway, he's a podcaster like us. So before you shit talk him too much,
I'm not shit talking. I'm shit talking the liberal school.
We might want to try to get on his podcast. So, I really enjoy listening to him talk and analyze any number of different things. So I'm really looking forward. This was not a recommendation from my niece. This was a straight up. I heard this book. It's brand new. It just hit last week. So it's not a very big book.
You better start cracking into those. Which one are you going to go first?
I think probably the Post-Corona, the Scott Galloway book. I think that his insights into business and how what industries are ripe for disruption, that kind of thing. He's a tech commentator as well. So I think I'm really interested in reading what he's thinking. He's pretty good with predictions and things like that.
So what do you know about his stance given, you mentioned his podcast. I don't know if he talks a lot about his corona views on the podcast that might have made their way to the book, but what do you know about the comment you just made? I think is a good one that you said industries that are ripe for disruption. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it because there are things that have changed during COVID that are not necessarily a bad thing, and maybe some of those things have to do with industry disruption, like when the airlines blocked off the middle seat. Nobody liked being crammed into an airline. Economy fares on airlines these days is shit. And when you're sandwiched in there, packed into threes, and I'm a tall guy, so I barely fit in the seats anyway. And then when you have people next to you, so for those of us that have flown in the COVID world and the middle seats have been blocked, that doesn't suck. Those of us that have flown and they don't do the boarding group numbers anymore, they board by the back of the plane, that's common sense and it doesn't suck because the whole reason they do these, stupid boarding groups is to give first access on the overhead bins. So, I think there are some, as I look at it, there's some industry changes that I never would have wished upon any of these businesses through the route of COVID. But if these things are here to stay or if there is disruption that comes of it, that'll be interesting. So I'm just curious, do you know anything about how he elaborates on that?
I think I do. I don't know what's in this book yet because it's too new and he's barely spoken about it, but knowing what some of his views are on those subjects, here's what I can tell you. So if the question to Scott Galloway was, hey, I'm just going into the business world, I'm looking for what's
survival
right.
kit. What do I do?
Yeah. You look for industries that are ripe for disruption. And so what makes an industry ripe for disruption? Total lack of consumer satisfaction, right? So he predicted a long time ago, a couple of years ago, that Amazon would go into healthcare and be the biggest healthcare provider in the United States. They just opened up there. They're not yet, but they just opened up one of their first forays into that world.
Aren't they trying to get their hands on the distribution of the vaccine?
Well, I don't know about that particularly. I wouldn't be surprised, but they just opened up Amazon Pharmacy, right? So when Amazon announced that they were going to have pharmacy services available, all the stocks for the CVS's and the Walgreens and all that all hit the toilet.
So what do you mean? They got the Amazon Pharmacy. You do like a virtual meeting with the doctor, or you just you get your prescription filled from Amazon?
You're going to get your prescriptions filled from Amazon.
So you get your actual script from a doctor, and you just add it to your Amazon account, and they ship you the drugs.
Right. And so think about it.
That doesn't suck.
Yeah. Here's what is. So let's take a minute here and look at because I love this analogy, and I used to work at a pharmacy. Believe it or not,
and you used to peddle Ray-Bans.
Yeah.
On the side, you had a side business.
That's right. So, it's always been nonsense to me when you go in there with a prescription, whether you're in pain or not, or you're sick or whatever. And it's like, no matter what it is, hey, I'll come back in 20 minutes. And then when you come back in 20 minutes, hey, just another 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
why is it always 20 minutes too, by the way? It's such a bullshit number. Everybody knows it's going to be more than 20, but that's the magic number we're willing to wait, but they all fucking say it. It's always 20 minutes.
It's there's only one reason for that. I mean, I filled a lot of prescriptions in the 2 years I worked at the pharmacy from start to finish, from reading the prescription, getting the pills off the stock shelf, counting them out, putting them in the bottle, typing the label, showing them to the pharmacist.
You always did one for you, two for me. One for you, two for me.
Well, it depends. But
don't worry, you're past the statute of limitations on that.
I know. It's a 2-minute process. I mean, it never takes more than that. And so the 20 minutes is based on how long it takes you to walk around a drugstore, and look at their shit. And that's what it is. And the 5 minutes is another 5 minutes for you to look at the stuff that's close to the pharmacy window. And that's the whole thinking about it. So right there, customer dissatisfaction makes the pharmacy industry ripe for disruption, right? So let's think about this. A lot of times you have to take your prescription into the pharmacy and get it filled. You have to go in and get your refills. You have to call them ahead of time, or depend on them to have some kind of broken down texting system that they're going to automatically fill them for you. All this doesn't work. And I personally have been constantly unsatisfied with the service I get from any pharmacy I've gone to since the day I quit working in a pharmacy. I can count my own pills.
They lost a good man.
Yeah. So this is the kind of thing Amazon does right? You're going to be, why would you ever want to go into a store to pick up your meds? Just send them to my house. And even right now, I mean, there have been mail order prescription services available for a while, but it's not Amazon.
Been mail order brides.
Right. Yeah. An immigrant story. Yeah, I mean, it's like, hey, so Amazon is going to just do this correctly. It's not the post office. It's not. It's just they're going to do it. It's going to be seamless. So what's the deal?
Did they have to get some FDA approval or what? Because it seems to me like just the delivery process would be easy.
Yeah, I mean,
they have the infrastructure.
Yeah, I think, and they're going to be able to, look, they're going to be able to provide online physicians and telemedicine and all that kind of stuff. So look for Amazon to be one of the biggest medical services providers there is, probably the biggest. I don't think it'll take more than a couple of years.
I think that makes perfect sense. Again, for a company like that just delivers everything. And, we're in a world where I was just kind of thinking about this, maybe even, I don't know, 5, 7, certainly 10 years ago, if you got a package within a business week, that was considered pretty good. And then with Amazon Prime, when you started to get things within 2 days, that was kind of unheard of. That's the whole reason that people paid for Amazon Prime. And nowadays, it's not unheard of to get a package the next day or even the same day. I've ordered shit on a Sunday and had it on Sunday. I mean, it's just weird. And when you live near some of these distribution hubs, I think that that's going to be the norm, and it creates this expectation from consumers. And I think that's one of the appeals of Amazon and why they're, beating the competitors, is because they can get the packages to you much more quickly. But I guess where I'm going with that is, I would think on the pharmaceutical side, on the prescription drugs, that would be something Amazon would want to do or was planning on doing anyway, right? Why not?
It's been in the works for quite a while, and again, I think it's just the spearhead of their complete move toward medical service, providing medical services. I mean, there are quite a few drugs you can get now with a simple consultation with a physician, online or something, right? You don't have to. And here's the thing too. I mean, it's not just going to be prescriptions, right? They're going to be able to provide 90%. I mean, most of the time when you go to see a doctor, it's a waste of time anyway.
Oh, I know.
Right. Why do you need to go in? I mean, I think one of the things that's going to be positively affected by the COVID stuff is telemedical services. I mean, right now I really kind of need to go. I should go in, I should get a blood panel, and I should go in and see my doctor. But why do I need to go in and see him? What I really need is the blood panel. I need him to
go to the lab.
I need to go to the lab unless they can figure out a way to come here and get my blood, which they probably could.
You
but
could actually. I just did real quick. I did an in-home food allergy test, and they send you Everlywell was the company, and they send you this little finger prick pin like you would if you have diabetes, and they walk you through this process. And there's this little card, and it has a bunch of circles, and you prick your finger, and you squeeze your own blood out into each one of these little circles until you fill them all up, and then you mail it in, and they give you your results of any particular food allergies that you may have. I already got my results back.
That's right. You know, there's a whole podcast. There's a whole documentary series available. There was a gal that dropped out of, I'm going to say it was Yale or something like that. And so what you're doing there are pinprick blood, analysis for. So some things can be done that way. Other blood tests need a larger amount of blood. What I'm talking about here. This is so interesting. In fact, there's a podcast called The Dropout, which is about the rise and fall of this. This is a company. She proposed that she could develop a machine that would go into, say, CVS pharmacies, and you could go in anytime you want and they would do a fingertip prick, and with that much blood, they could perform 250 different blood tests,
right?
Which is not true, never was true, and probably doesn't look like it will ever be true. But she got tens of millions.
Why? Because it's not enough blood?
Yeah, it's not
Isn't
enough
it
blood.
that is it, and I don't know this to be true, but is it because that they destroy the samples in the test, whatever they're looking for? Is that why?
Well, I mean, most of the blood tests take more than a finger prick's worth of blood. So the theory here was, hey, you could go in, do one finger prick worth of blood, and then do 250 different tests. That was the technology that she was supposedly devising. It doesn't exist, and it never did exist. But she got tens of millions of dollars in what do you call it? What's
Investments?
The investment? Yeah,
venture capitalist money.
Venture capital, right? And then managed to get some pretty high profile endorsements from people both in and out of the medical world. Anyway, it was a scam, and she's in jail right now, or waiting to go to jail or something. Yeah.
Wow. Was this here in the US?
It's a fascinating story, huh?
This is in the US?
Yeah, this is the United States. Yeah. And
so she probably get
look
out of
on
jail
HBO.
now.
I'm pretty sure it's HBO. There's a documentary on this that's in their queue on HBO. Anyway,
wouldn't that be cool though if you could do that? I mean, that, because you're right. None of us want to go into the lab and draw that much blood, and I can't personally look when they take my blood. I have to look away. So even on the finger prick test, I wasn't happy about it.
Right. Well, just to do a simple panel, you need a vial worth of blood, right? So, and the people that draw that blood, they have a name. That's a whole career. It's and here's the thing, right? So if you could do that kind of testing with finger pricks, then a new world of medical, preventive medicine kind of opens up, right? So
that's got to be coming, don't you think? I mean, we got to have some type of advancements.
There's a science about it, but it's a way. And maybe it will come. I mean, who the fuck? I'm not qualified to make any prognostications on that. I can just tell you, in the 10 years or so that she promulgated this scam, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars. I think actually, I have to look at the stats on this. Think about it. You have a company. You've been involved in business. If you had $40 million to piss away, how long could you run a business with $40 million to just piss out the back end of your business, right?
I would just retire
until you run out of money. Yeah, right. Exactly. So, and that's why she's, up on fraud charges, right? Because she fraudulently, and we don't really even know if she was deluded or what the hell was going on, right? Again, another egomaniac type personality.
Is she, I don't know this story, but was she arrested because, was it more of an FDA thing on the actual science, or was it from the investor side? Do you know?
No, I don't know, but I will say that the criminal charges that she's facing are fraud. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know what though? You want it to be true, right? You want the technology to be true because everything that we're talking about, it sucks to go in there. But don't you hate when
on this particular story, she did. I mean, the criminal liabilities here. I mean, she led lots of people to believe that they went in, put a finger prick's worth of blood into this machine. They actually developed a machine that was in these CVS or Walgreens or whatever the hell it was. And it turns out that, inside that machine, the blood was being sloshed all over the inside of the machine. It was disgusting.
It's like mice that come through it and make the bite on your finger.
And they were coming back and giving people clear results, negatives on all kinds of important, blood tests. And it's a little hard to prove, but I'm going to guess that cost some people their lives. And imagine the kind of nonsense that could be going on in this fear-ridden post-COVID world with that kind of scam if it hadn't been nipped in the bud. So for all of our listeners and for you, that's an interesting story. I'll try to, by the time we talk again, I'll try to have the actual names. I will tell you that there's a podcast available right next to ours called The Dropout that is the whole story. It's a great podcast, but the documentary on HBO
is it the second best podcast in the directory?
Well, maybe.
No, that's interesting. But go back to what you were saying as far as going to the doctor, and really what you need to do is go to the lab to have your blood drawn. But even the whole process, and I think this ties into the bigger conversation where we talk about health insurance and health coverage, which is certainly a big talking point in the U.S. and around the world these days. But it is interesting that, and also based on certain insurance programs that you have, the HMOs versus the PPOs. And one of, I think, the staples of an HMO is that you always have to go see your primary care doctor first, and they give you a referral, even if you need to go to see an ear doctor. And it's a whole unnecessary step and added layers and extra costs. And I've had ear issues, so that's why I use that reference. But I've personally been into the doctor, and they're pulling out their iPad, Googling the shit, Googling the symptoms, and, oh, this is what you have. Are you sure? I don't think so. This isn't how it happened. And they don't know. I mean, I'm not saying doctors are dumb, but I mean, you especially on the primary side, they're expected to know every single condition and every single ailment. I mean, that's just not practical.
No. It's a practice, right? The reason they call medicine a practice is because, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, there's never any games. There's just always practice. I'm practicing.
That's right. Well, the game is when you come in.
Yeah, right.
Say, hey,
we don't count the score.
Well, think about so the medical profession, medical medicine is an entire segment that, first off, healthcare is like 14% of the GDP or something, right? You have to look that one up, but I bet that's close. It's a huge segment. It's one of the biggest single segments of business, and it's ripe for disruption all the way around. Think about it, Travis. Here's the example, and I'm not going to try to steal this from Scott Galloway. This is his example. Think about it. You go into a Sephora. So you're a woman consumer going into Sephora to buy cosmetics, and you have to go up to a sliding window and say, hey, I'm here to buy some makeup. And then somebody hands you a clipboard and a pen and says, hey, fill this out, have a seat, fill this out. And somebody will be with you in maybe 20 minutes. and that's how your consumer experience goes at Sephora. You think Sephora would be successful if that was the case, but that's how it works when you go into your doctor's office.
No,
right?
I know.
And it's just a fucking, so every consumer every medical service consumer is unsatisfied. That makes that whole business ripe. So, in some of our previous discussions about medicine or insurance or the Affordable Care Act, I think this is where we need to, this is where the thinking and the discussions need to go. Hey, we need to tear this whole system down and rebuild it from the ground up with something that works. And I think you and I have been saying that right along, right?
And I think the common denominator there is, reading between the lines of your story, is that consumers want a better way and they want more choices. And I think, I didn't mean to turn this into an ACA discussion, but I think one of the problems is that we need more choices so people can get the care and the service that they need, whether it's medication. I mean, when I hear your Amazon story about delivering drugs, I hope that they still deliver and sell illegal drugs because, some of the stuff I buy is currently from a very reputable pharmacia, and I still need to have access to it. So hopefully Amazon will participate.
Well, you won't have to drive down to Mexico much longer. That's what I'm going to tell you. Yeah, I think another industry that's ripe for this that we've already mentioned is air travel. I mean, there's no such thing as a satisfied air travel consumer. The experience sucks from the first moment of contact till the time you get off the fucking plane and get out of the stupid crowded airport.
And that'll be interesting because I was reading an article just this morning about, I think the title of it was, when will this pandemic end, or how will we know when it's over? And they didn't really answer that, but they kind of went down two different paths. And one is, if your definition of when the pandemic will be over is based on when life returns to early 2019 levels, then here's this, and this that'll happen. And if your definition is that we'll get some of our freedoms back, but we'll still have some of the post-pandemic ways of life in there, then here's the timeline for that. And when you examine some of those, like the airlines, for example, I think some of these things are going to be here to stay, whether it's, masks, God, I hope not forever, but whether it's, screening, I could see screening, I could see health checks, I could see documentation. I mean, obviously there's a whole program for Hawaii and other places like that where you have to have, results and all that stuff has to be uploaded and traceable, whether or not it's limited capacity, if they totally redesign the inside of the cabins to, create more social distancing. I don't know, but I think some of that stuff is here to stay.
Well, I mean, I'm sure some of it is here to stay. I mean, airlines, I mean, I don't see airlines. I mean, at some point, the amount of people inside the planes probably has to come back. If they took the middle seats out forever and raised the price, I could probably live with that. But I mean, there's some economics involved with this, right? For in the short term, they can do whatever they want. But in the long term, airlines barely make money to begin with because they're run so poorly.
I know. And I think the thing that I hate the most about it is that, here we are in 2020, and it still takes 5 freaking hours to fly across the country. You're still crammed into a sardine. It's still, you have the process of checking your bag and waiting in these long lines. And you would think, based on all these science fiction novels and movies, that shouldn't we have like teleporting or something by now? This is fucking ridiculous. Still takes 5 hours.
Are you old enough to remember the SST?
No.
You don't even know what the SST is.
Yeah. No, what is it?
Supersonic transport, the plane.
Well, like the Concorde, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I know the Concorde.
Yeah.
How many times do you think I've watched the crash footage of that thing?
That's right. That's right. Well, so you probably know more about this than me. How long would it take you to go from California to New York on the SST?
Well, they wouldn't fly it because of the sound barrier. It only was over the ocean. So it would go.
How long did you get from here to?
Like New York to London was, I don't know, 3 hours.
An hour?
No, like 2.5, 3 hours, something like that.
So, I mean, look, sometimes the technology goes backwards, and is it for good reasons or was it simply a money thing? I don't know. I mean,
well, it was the economics that drove it. It was because, again, that particular flight was not allowed over the continental U.S. because of the sound, and so you had a complete.
Kind of sounds like you could fly around the edge of the country.
Well, maybe. I mean, fly over Canada. Fuck those guys.
Yeah, really. What do we care? What's that big boom? What's that all about? So.
But it was you've ignored a whole entire market segment that you couldn't get passengers on, and then there was no other competition that I know of. So you had, and that was a joint venture, I think, between the British and the French, and you really had the East Coast U.S. market into Europe. That was kind of the only route. So was that enough to sustain that type of business? I don't think so.
But how often? I mean, how often does technology go backwards? I mean, we had the technology to fly those great distances. Pardon me. and transport a buttload of people in the process, and we abandoned it instead of fixing it. So
well, and again, that's the economics that's behind it. Like one of my favorite airplanes to fly on is the A380. That's the big double-decker Airbus with the 4 engines, and it's huge. It's massive, and it's very comfortable. But that thing's been flying for, I don't know, 10, 13 years, something like that, and they're going to discontinue it because it can't land at every runway around the world because of the landing and takeoff runway distances that it needs. And I don't know how many people it holds, 500, 600, something like that.
Well, here's the good news. There's a ton of 737 MAX planes ready to take up the slack.
I know, they're coming back. You going to get on one?
Well, probably. I mean, I think if they tell me it's safe, I'm probably going to get on it. I mean,
what about,
I never thought it wasn't safe, to be honest with you. Obviously, there was a problem with this.
Do you need to consult with the Democrats when they said they wouldn't take the Trump vaccine because it was on Trump's watch?
No. Well, they're coming back on.
I had
Biden's
to jab
watch.
you on that one.
Yeah, that's all right.
I remember early in the 737 MAX fiasco before it was grounded here, you and I were both flying to Vegas, and I remember I called the airline to see if they were flying us on a MAX, and it was still operational, and they weren't. But that company was still flying them. Yeah,
I was relieved at that point because we didn't know what causes the planes to go down. I mean, maybe they just simply left out the lever that keeps the plane in the air. I don't know.
Well, all these freaking crashes are pilot error. That's what they say.
Yeah, and look, I don't think there's ever been an aircraft issue. You probably know more about this than I do. That has been more deeply investigated than this, and they certainly have taken 10 times more time than we thought.
That's what they say. Now that this thing is recertified, it basically will be the safest plane in the air because it's been scrutinized, and the training and system redundancies after redundancy, so it should be the safest plane. But I mean,
I would like to see a couple plane loads of Trump supporters fly the plane first, and then if they're okay, I'll be happy to take it after.
Maybe his final flight out of Washington would be on Air Force 2 on a 737 MAX.
As the people, we should comp it.
That one you're willing to pay for? Would you fly him to one of his golf courses? Are you okay with that?
That's fine. Land the fucking plane right on the golf course for all I care.
These fucking plane crashes, though. I mean, most of them, the 737 MAX was, that's not just pilot error. I mean, certainly there was not enough training for the pilots who flew that plane, but it's not even aerodynamic. I mean, one of the big issues, the whole reason why they have this fucking MCAS system, which is the computer that overcorrects and controls if there's a stall, is because there will be a stall in certain circumstances because it's aerodynamically flawed. And specifically, the 737 sits very low to the ground. Maybe you've noticed this when you get on one. And the circumference of the engines are they're inches off the ground. I don't know, 12 inches, 18 inches, whatever they are. But for the MAX, because they made the fuselage that much bigger, they increased the engine size. But that meant that if they mounted them to the same spot of the wing, they would touch the ground. So they moved them higher up on the wings because they needed more ground clearance. And that movement combined with the thrust makes it not aerodynamic, and it's prone to a stall. And a stall isn't...
Is the MCAS supposed to compensate the stall?
Yes. And so, again, I'm not a pilot, but I have mentioned I have an interest in this, and I have family that flies. And so a stall in an airplane isn't engine failure. A stall is lift, a lack of lift. And usually lift comes from the wings. And so you can stall by nose up too high or too high of a turn in a bank or something like that. And so, yes, the plane, because of the design, was prone to a stall. And so if you took off in certain circumstances and the nose pitched up, it would stall, which means you're basically losing lift and you're falling. And the MCAS is designed to push the nose down, because in a stall you need speed to correct and overcompensate that. And so at altitude, at elevation, how you get speed is nose down, and then you'll get speed, which you can get your lift back. So the MCAS pushes the nose down. But if you're flying a plane and you are climbing and all of a sudden the nose goes down, you're going to fucking panic. And that's what all these pilots did. So the MCAS pushed the nose down. Pilots freaked out, pulled the nose back, and there was something in the early design of that it would do it maybe 2 or 3 times. It'd push the nose back down. Let me take that back. I think the redesign is that maybe 2 or 3 attempts to correct then all of a sudden it's in manual flight control for the pilots. But the early design was if the pilots fought it, the computer would take over and just send the nose down, and they couldn't recover, and that's why they crashed.
Right. And how many crashes were there? Just two, right?
Yeah, there were two.
Yeah.
They were
a couple close calls, I think.
Well, I don't know about that. There was Indonesian Air and I think an Ethiopian Air. Both went down, and they say the pilots weren't trained in it, and they really had no information on what that system even did.
Is there any correlation with those crashes being on airlines that are, I don't know what the right word is,
third world countries, lack of training,
Yeah,
not America. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. How was there no American, with all the flights and all the, 737 MAX flights that had to be going on at that point, how were there two crashes in such close succession, and both of them in far-flung parts of the world?
I don't know.
Was it a training thing?
Well, I'm sure that information is available in the reports. I think the conventional wisdom is that those pilots just don't have the level of training. Specifically, I don't think you need the same number of required hours as a pilot in certain. I think the U.S. has a standard regardless of what carrier you're a pilot for. But in other countries, it's different, and the first officer training is different. I think some countries allow maybe not pilot training, but co-pilot training with just simulator hours and not actual in-flight hours.
Well, then how, in your opinion, is Trump responsible for the two crashes? Sorry, just a little jab out there for the Trump side of our listenership.
Right? How come they're not trying to pin that on him, right?
Right, exactly. So, okay, so there it is. There's the books, my reading list, the Oprah, our version.
Are those
Oprah
in the Oprah book
list.
club? Do I need to scratch that off the list now?
No, they are not in the Oprah book club.
So here's, I was starting to ask you though on that COVID book specifically, the Scott Galloway book. Did I say that right? Scott Galloway?
Yeah.
What else? So the basic premise is that you look for industries that are ripe for disruption. Does he elaborate more? Or is that the basic principle that you look at something that needs to be disrupted and where there's extreme consumer dissatisfaction and that is what the post-COVID world is going to be?
Well, that is, I don't know, again, don't know what's in this book. I assume I have heard him elaborate on, that sort of process. Hey, if you're looking, if you want to know what part of the business to break into or focus on or invest in, look for something that's ripe for disruption. And what's the great example of disruption that we've seen recently? What is it? I'm trying to think. I had it on the tip of my tongue earlier, but can you think of one, Travis? What industry
voter
has
fraud?
gone through voter fraud? Yeah. Voting machines is going to be the next one.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Everything. How about the auto industry? Why in this day and age do you still have to go to a dealership
and you don't,
right? And you get harassed by the salespeople, and you're just looking, and they never let you leave. And yes, there are times when you can order a vehicle online and you can do the paperwork remotely. But if you're financing a vehicle and you go in there, this is what always bugged the shit out of me. You figure out you're going to buy this vehicle. You work out the numbers. Here's my trade. Here's my down payment. Here's all I can afford per month on this vehicle or any vehicle. Let's work it to the penny. That's all I can afford. Okay, I'll stretch it out to 60 months instead of 48 months to make it work. All right, we got it. And then you go into the goddamn finance office and they throw in these freaking warranties and all that other bullshit and the gap insurance that you need, and it changes your payment $100 before you walk out of there. That's backwards to me. Work that shit in. I already told you what I can afford. Work it in before I go sit down with you, because now you just killed the whole deal. These fucking guys.
I think there's a. I don't know if you've seen this advertising. I don't know how much regular actual TV you watch, but there is.
Unless it's on Fox, I'm not watching it. Just kidding.
Oh my God, there is a. So there's an auto. What is the name of this? Is it Zoom? Is it Vroom? I don't know.
Is it the one with the cars are in the tower and you just go pick it up and
there's that one. That's where it's their car vending machine.
Right.
And there's a couple of, I think that we've already seen some disruption in the auto dealership, business, setup, right? I think we've seen some disruption in that. and I think it's coming. So I think I hopefully as we talk, it'll come back to me. There is a segment that's already been disrupted and changed significantly that fits right into this. And here's the thing: once it happens, you're kind of on the backside of it, right? You're kind of too late. You need to.
That's true about most things. I mean, we don't create anything as a people. I mean, I don't build airplanes in my garage to fly in, so I'm kind of stuck flying in whatever tin can they have available for me, and all the procedures they put in place. What can I do about it?
Right. So healthcare, in all of its facets, auto industry, just so many different things that. So I'm really, that's going to be the first one I read.
I will be curious to get your take on it.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's more kind of data driven and kind of identifying these industries, or if it's more politically based in the sense that here are the things that we need to do as a society to live in a post-COVID world.
Well, I think the other one that he's going to talk about in this book is education. And I don't think so much, the lower education, but higher education. He's a university professor, right? And so all this talk about free college and all this stuff, I can tell you already that he's already come out saying that's fucking stupid. There's no such
good. I like him already.
College. Yeah. So, but he's not a conservative or anything.
You don't need to be a conservative to identify bad ideas or good ideas.
Right. Exactly. I agree. And so I think that his contention is that, hey, higher education is, and you're seeing a lot of it right now. I mean, a lot of higher education, we need to make it more accessible to everybody, not by providing free. Why would you give free college or free university level studies to rich kids, right? So when you make it free for everybody, you give all the people that can afford
do you think
a
that's
free
really
ride.
Do you think that's really what they're saying? Because even the conversation about eliminating student loan debt, the current debt on the table right now, that's the headline, but that's not exactly what's happening. I think there's a cap of 50,000, and I think that's tied to your current income level. So if you have graduated and you carry a certain amount of debt, but your income is above a certain level, you don't qualify for the write-off. So when you say something like that, I'm assuming that there's a caveat that would be built into a conversation that we need to make it free. But yes, if you have the means, by other ways, then it wouldn't be free to you.
I think that his contention is probably what I've heard him expound on this a little bit, and I think his contention is probably that we need to the exclusivity, the Ivy Leagueness of higher. We need to lose all that shit,
admissions, all of that,
and we need to figure out how to make higher education virtually available to everybody, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's free, but it's not about what it costs. It should be about availability. Right now, the ability to get into a higher education university
School,
or something, right? Many people are just not qualified, and that needs to that part of it.
You're not qualified because of their academic record, but qualified because of
probably both, right? And the idea that you're going to disqualify, and you know what, probably would be better if I read this, and I'm going to guess he's going to elaborate on that. I've only heard him talk about it a couple of times, but it made sense to me. As a society, we need to say, hey, it is a priority that that all forms of education are available to anybody that wants it, not just to a select handful of people that happen to qualify and have the money and come from the right family and blah, 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 blah.
With a caveat, don't you think there needs to be some, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but obviously there has to be a cut line somewhere. And I don't mean at the entry level point, but I mean after admission or whatever. There's got to be a screening. In other words, I need somebody who can understand math to be a doctor or a dentist.
I think some of his thoughts go more along the line of, hey, you don't need a 4-year college degree to do a whole lot of things.
All right. I agree with that.
So we need to get away from the idea that, hey, the only thing that matters is some kind of college diploma or, a 4-year college or postgraduate, there are tons of opportunities out there for people to acquire instruction and education in order to be able to have the math to do what you need them to do as an employer without a 4-year degree. So it has more to do with, hey, when you're out there doing job interviews, everybody that doesn't have a college degree is off the table.
I think that's changing. I think that's changing.
And it should. And I think
degree.
that's what he's saying. Hey, that needs to change radically. We need to focus less on meaningless college degrees and more on making instruction and education available to much larger numbers of people at much lower cost, which would make sense.
Yeah, and
I have more people participating. The costs for providing it should be spread out over a bigger group, not free for anybody, just not so goddamn expensive.
Well, you're speaking my language now because, as I've said, everybody should pay something in your society. You got to contribute something to get something back. So I agree with that premise that it shouldn't be free. But
so I think that's another industry, if you're going to call it that, that's ripe for disruption.
You know what bugs me about this current conversation about eliminating student loan debt and the quote-unquote squad in Congress, they're calling for this to be done on Biden's watch on day one, is just the argument. Everything that you have said, I agree with as far as the problems that exist in higher education and the cost and the availability and all of that. It's totally true. The need for higher education and the example you just gave, that the pathway to success used to be very linear. I mean, you followed this path. You graduate from high school, you get a 4-year degree, and you become attractive to an employer, and you get a long-term job and all of that. Society has changed, employers have changed, people have changed as far as what they're looking for. Maybe, people bounce around jobs quite a bit these days, and maybe that is because of the experience of higher education, that they're not getting what they need out of schooling, and so really they're learning on the job to only find out they don't like that job or whatever. But the argument about eliminating student loan debt, what just boils my fucking blood about it, is that they make it sound like it's predatory, that these colleges and the people that carry the debt, and I don't know who they are, I don't know if these are government-backed loans or if it's similar to a credit card company, but they're not knocking these kids over the head and saying, you will sign these loan papers and you will go to this expensive 4-year college and you will owe us this money. What did these kids think when they agreed to sign those loan docs to say, all right, I guess I'll take on this loan for this education and I'm willing to gamble in myself because when I graduate, I'm sure I'll get a job to pay this off. I mean, what does that say about every other commitment and loan that you take in life?
Yeah. I think there was a question in there that you just posed that I'd like to hear the answer to, and I don't know the answer to. What did they think? I mean, why did they decide that they?
Where's my curly clip? They tried to think, but nothing happened.
Where's your thing? I think that to a certain degree, a great deal of these people that have acquired a tremendous amount of student loan debt feel that it was predatory in the sense that no, they weren't shanghaied and knocked over the head and forced to be sailors on a Chinese junk, but they were, I think that they were led to believe that they would have no future without higher education, without a college degree, without going into one of these professions and taking on what's the scientific term, an assload of debt. Right. I think that they did. I think to some extent that is part of it. And I think that
but
is
whose fault
part
is
of
that?
why,
these nincompoops agreed to it.
Hey, look, I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole because I totally, I would have never taken it on.
Right.
So, but
same thing with credit card debt. Did you know my interest was 30%? Yeah, well, don't carry a balance. You won't have that problem. I mean, duh.
I hear you. No, I think that I don't have a whole lot. I'm not a big fan of the eliminate the debt. I mean, if you took the debt on, if it was predatory, then fuck them. I think that certainly a lot of the loan mortgage stuff that happened back in the Great Recession was predatory, but hey, guess what? Nobody went to jail. Nobody.
Well, and that's different. And I don't disagree that it was predatory, but the difference there is you had very specific and defined lending practices and procedures, credit scores, income documentation, and all of that was just tossed out the window in an attempt to sell more loans and move more real estate. So I would agree that that certainly was predatory. But in the case of student loan debt, it's like, you have to be able to figure out, especially if you're going into a specific profession, you know what the going rate is for those jobs, and for, certainly starting pay, you know what your payment terms are going to be on your loan. So why would you agree to something that you know you can't pay for?
Yeah, I think maybe part of it is a complete lack of the ability to understand what $100,000 of debt is.
Maybe, and maybe that's what it is. They're just totally disconnected from it because it just sounds like a number, and maybe that's why all these kids out of college, the knock against the first graduating classes of the millennials was they all wanted $80,000 to $100,000 as starting pay, and everybody laughed at them. And maybe that's because, well, I got $100,000 in student loan debt, I got to pay for it. Well, that's your own fault. Guess what? The job you're taking pays $42,000. Get in line.
So I'm dying to tell you my story.
Yeah, tell me your story.
My Thanksgiving story. So are you up for that?
Is this the Adam Sandler Thanksgiving story? Yeah, tell me.
The Adam Sandler.
Are you gonna play guitar?
So on Saturday, my wife and I and my wife's sister, we left here at 8:15 in the morning, drove to Las Vegas.
Crossing the state lines.
Hung out there. We drug our COVID from California into Nevada.
Super spreading.
Hung out at a family home there, where there was exactly one other person and then two people that were asleep. So we never saw them.
Check a pulse.
One of those two people is involved in is a I'm not sure what his exact title is right now, but he's a nurse and he's working in a trauma facility. So he had got home at 7:00 and he'd be going back. So it's been tough out there. The COVID's out of control and the hospital's full. And if he wasn't a believer, he is now in the COVID. So we never saw them. But so my niece that recommended these books, the one that wanted to punch you in the face.
Yeah, it's understandable.
So shout out to Christine, right?
Hi, Christine.
She's coming around. She doesn't so much want to punch you in the face anymore. She does like the fact that you know how to push my buttons. So it's
all in good fun.
And so anyway, we went out there. We hung out there for a couple hours, ate some food. A couple other members of the family came over, and then we got back on the road about 2:15. So there's the travel story. So that's not the first time. We've actually made that trip 3 times in one day a few years ago after a holiday, and drove home from Vegas, drove back to Vegas, picked somebody up, drove back home. This was just the there and back scenario. So we did get a good chance to see how many people were traveling
and
by road. And coming back, there was an assload of them. There was a lot of people. It took 6 hours to get back from Vegas, which
it was about 2 hours longer than normal.
Yeah, and that was slow traffic. It never stopped. We didn't stop.
What day of the week was this?
Saturday. So I think we thought we were going to beat some of the traffic coming back on Saturday. I don't know. Our plan was to drive out there, get there by noon and turn around, drop her sister off, turn around and head home. But the family there wanted to have lunch and say hi. And, we didn't get to get together for Thanksgiving and all that. So,
so are you placing yourself under quarantine?
Yeah, no.
Aren't you supposed to per California's our dictatorial governor?
Nobody's checking. So
that's the way I view it. See, you are more like me.
Well, nobody's checking. So, I don't lose. This is something that I don't think I've said in our discussion. So that's about the whole story. It was, but several people out there. And here's why I wanted to tell that story. I went. So you could say I went out there to visit our listeners because we have a big
promotional event. So it was essential promotional travel.
It was essentially promotional travel. Thank you.
Good work.
I'm going to use that in court.
Yeah.
When the cops come, when the state police, the staties come.
And now we've documented it.
Yeah. So I will say that, one of the things that this draws to my mind is taking back over all of our discussions mostly about, I guess, the restrictions that different governments, state or federal, could or would or might impose or have imposed. I guess part of it is like, I don't get so excited about it because I don't see any way that they can make me comply with anything I don't want to do. I'm not, like there's no stay-at-home order here, so I didn't really violate anything. Although you really weren't supposed to travel, but we ended up driving out there. It was pretty self-contained. I mean, I can't infect anybody if I'm inside my vehicle driving at a cool 90 miles an hour. On the way out there was sweet.
Must have been in the BMW.
Is there anybody from the company listening? I'm just going to say this. I prefer to travel in a higher profile vehicle with a better view down the road. So the BMW, that's the wrong term. The Beamers are motorcycles, just so you know. The car is sweet to drive and sweeter even to drive at 90 plus, but it's just you just can't see far enough ahead. I mean, I need to be on a racetrack or something for that to really be that much better. And I've done it before. When I did the three legs of the Vegas thing, the first leg coming back was in the car. I had flown out to Vegas to meet up with Debbie, and then drove them back. And then when we got here and we said, "Oh, we need to go back," we didn't take the car back. I needed to take one of the trucks so I could, be a little higher. But it's just like, hey, I'm not feeling much oppression from the COVID stuff.
That's the most important point, I think, and I think that's where the whole world is. I mean, there's story after story in the news about these politicians, mostly Democrats, because that's where I think a lot of the hypocrisy lies, in the sense that mostly Democratic authority figures, whether governors, mayors, whatever, are virtue signaling with their masks and their stay-at-home orders, and in many cases actually putting these orders in place, and then they're caught violating their own orders. I mean, there's probably 6 to 10 stories in the news just over the long weekend about that. But I think the point is this, that the whole world is saying one thing and doing another, because people are tired of it, and it's how much are you going to alter your life? And we've talked about this. All the shit in the news over the last few days is bad news, and everyone's saying that the deaths are going to skyrocket, and we all have to do our part, and we're saving lives. I think there's a lot of, just false statements in the news. I mean, you gotta, like I always say, you can't get your news in headlines and in sound bites. You got to dig into the detail and read these reports. But more and more people are doing what you just said, which is, hey, they can't enforce it. There's not enough of them. And I think if more of society said that and said, fuck you, come and get me, there's more of us than there are of you, then we'd all be in a better place.
Kind of always been my philosophy. And there's been a few things over the course of my life that I've done that might have been considered illegal by certain repressive forces. And the mere fact of it was, there just wasn't enough of them to figure out what we were doing.
But nowadays, each of us are criminals in the eyes of our government just by doing the basic things that we did 9 months ago. Isn't that fucking crazy?
Well, it is all of it is pretty crazy. I'm just pulled up. I'm looking at, here are the current numbers, folks. 13, this is the United States only. 13, let's just call it 14 million cases. 274,000 deaths. So that's where we're at. So, I mean, I guess,
which those numbers are misleading, but that's what the numbers say. I agree with you. But what it doesn't say
Go ahead. Tell me how those numbers are misleading.
I'm going to tell you exactly how. Number one, what's not in that report or just that headline is how many people have recovered.
Oh, no, it is 8,144,000
have recovered
out of 14,000
million.
So out of 14 million. So that means that the difference between those two numbers are in the hospitals.
Yeah, but the difference between those two numbers isn't deaths, right? But here's the most. The
deaths is 273,
and we know that's not true. And that's the most important point from that report, which is all the way back to the first whistleblower report from the CDC, was that these numbers were wrong. They were being inflated. I'm not making the accusation that they were deliberately inflated like Trump did. to suggest that the hospitals do it to get more money. I'm not suggesting that. But what we do know is that the numbers that you're reporting, that most of the media reports, this 270,000, that number is not just COVID deaths. And we've already talked about this. I sent you the link on the CDC report, which basically had an average of each death had an average of.
Read that report.
It's not as long as those books that you got. So, but the average death had 2.6 other comorbidities. So, I mean, listen, young people die, old people die. We don't wish this on anybody. We're not trying to get it, but it's not the Black Plague. The response to this whole thing.
So you don't think that the number of people in the United States that have died as a result of contracting COVID is 273,000? What do you think it is?
Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you another report, and I'll find this link. I just read it this weekend. I'll send this to you. But I think that the report is 270,000 people have died that they've checked the box COVID next to their death. That's what I think. That's where you're getting that number. They also, in many of those cases, in most of those cases, according to the CDC, they have also checked other boxes where they've said they had COVID. They also had this, and this, and an average of 2.6 of those boxes to be exact. So that's where I think those numbers are coming from. But I read this other report, and I'll send you this link, that basically said that speaks to that most of, when you look at the deaths year over year in the U.S., all deaths, heart disease, diabetes, all that stuff, that we're basically averaging the same number of deaths as we did last year, COVID included, which I think speaks to the fact that those numbers are being, I don't want to say inflated, but cross-contaminated, for a better word. They're being misclassified. So take a look at that and see what you think.
Well, I mean, I guess the reason why, can you take a stab? And how much do you think this number is inflated then? By 100,000?
Well, I don't know about numbers, but by percentage, according to the CDC, it was like 95, 96%.
You think this number is off by 96%?
No, I think that many people died. But I don't think that many people died because of COVID.
Right. So how many?
Well, that report.
If this number, if 273 is inflated by 96%.
Yeah, what's the math? Find one of your college kids that took out a giant loan to be a mathematician.
If 96% of 273,000 has got to be like 250,000.
Yeah, here's what I'm saying. That many people did not die of COVID. They died of other diseases, and they also had COVID in their system. Those are the facts.
But what difference does that make?
Well, it makes a big difference because we're treating this as a sole standalone event, which it's not. We're treating this as the Black Plague, all of the shit that we've done for 9 months.
If contracting COVID, if you have other issues, you're fat, you're diabetic, you're
yes,
you have, dick cancer or whatever.
Don't leave out anal cancer.
Anal cancer, and contracting COVID pushes you over the edge. That's still someone that died that wouldn't have died. And I don't think
that's
it matters
not true.
whether they have comorbidities.
Well, that's not true. And I just
think that's a way to look. Well, whatever. I mean, I don't really. It's not a big issue to me, but I don't think that's the right way to look at it. So,
well, my opinion of this is simply that there's more to the story, there's more to the facts than just the headlines and the sound bites. And I'm not accusing you of only reading the headlines and the sound bites. I know you read deep, and that's what we spend most of our time talking about, but most people don't. And I think this whole COVID response is predicated on the fact that people will obey. You just said it yourself. There's not enough of them to enforce this bullshit restrictions on me. I think the rest of the world is slowly starting to come to grips with that. And I don't mean the extreme people who are, protesting and surrounding, state capitol buildings or whatever. I just mean the everyday people that are going, really? I just drove back from Vegas and I'm supposed to quarantine? Yeah, fuck that. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not sick. I feel fine. I'm not going around to other people, but that's it. So there's a personal responsibility here. And the big thing is that the government has changed the narrative. and most of the sheeple in this country have gone along with it. They've changed the narrative all the way back from it is the Black Plague, you will die if you get it. And in their defense, there was a lot that we didn't know about it at that time. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, slow the spread, all this shit. And it's all about deaths and overwhelming the hospital capacity. It's completely changed to case. That's all we care about is the case count. And they keep citing ICU beds availability and lack of medical capacity. Early on, we had ships, naval ships that came into the ports around this country for temporary hospitals in the event this was the Black Plague. Never turned out to be. And 9 months later, they keep telling us...
They wouldn't let anybody on the ships. So
well, that's not true.
They wouldn't let anybody on the ships that had COVID.
Well, they set up temporary hospitals in several ports around this country at air bases around this country. They were never used. Ultimately, were closed down. In California, in Sacramento, they took over the... the Kings basketball arena, set up a temporary hospital. Our dictator governor did many press conferences from there. They never used it. So if that really was an issue, and it is an issue now, where are the goddamn hospitals? How come they're not erecting more hospitals anticipating this spread? Instead, we need to cancel Thanksgiving. Thanks, Democrats. We need to cancel Christmas. Fuck you.
It's not even turning out to be a matter of hospitals or beds. It's a matter of medical personnel. They don't have enough. They're maxed out. The people that are actually qualified to work in hospitals and treat people with not only COVID, but everything else that comes along the road, the other 2.6 boxes that get checked when someone kicks off from COVID, because they don't have enough people. You can erect a bazillion hospitals. You can turn the fucking Coliseum into a hospital if you want, but if there's nobody to staff those beds, it's not relevant.
Well, and I don't know that's that certainly is an argument and a concern, but we never got to that point.
We're there right
we're
now.
Not there now. All of the fear mongering suggests that we will be there, but we're not as of this moment. We're not.
I don't talk to somebody in the Dakotas. Talk to the frontline workers in
and listen, I already told
Dakota.
you we've got so many problems and challenges in this country. And the one of which is Social Security, which is insolvent. So we knock off a couple 100,000 old people, and we've solved that problem. You know what I'm saying?
I can only say, watch it. I resemble that remark. Oh Lord!
Do you want to hear from our buddy? Keeping on topic of some presidential news. Do you want to hear? I mean, we only have a matter of a couple weeks that we can play some Trump sound bites before he's gone.
I will always be able to play him, but go ahead, play whatever you got.
Well, I mean, I just, there was obviously the big one that, is he going to leave, all this stuff about challenging in the Supreme Court and, will the electors defect and vote for him? I mean, basically that's kind of over, right? Is that what you're reading into it?
Well, I think, I had the chance to talk with, and I don't know if this particular person is listening at this stage of the game now. I'm not sure. I kind of doubt it, but maybe. So I'm going to keep this respectful because I do respect this person, but this is a true Trump, believer that I'm talking about here. And he is convinced that they have a trough of evidence that's going to turn up, what's the right word? It's gonna show that
affect the outcome here. Where is the evidence? Does Rudy keep it under that rug on his head?
Well, I mean, it said, hey, they have a lot of it, and his plea is let it play out, you'll see. And I'm just like, what in the hell are you talking about? And I got to say that this was a brief conversation because it started happening in the middle of the family Thanksgiving dinner. And not at the table, but afterwards. And it could have got ugly. I mean, it's the first time I've seen this flare up in my family. And I tried to stay out of it.
You got to get, man, you're a big time podcaster now. You got to be prepared for this shit.
And here's what I can tell you. There's no good way to do that in your family setting. So it makes me still.
Here's what you have to do.
Still want to have a one-on-one conversation with.
Here's
them
how I would suggest
even
it.
Then,
you got to tell them it's just show material and just bury it under the podcast so you can do it.
I don't see. I mean, this is a true believer, so I don't I don't see the path. Typically when I talk with someone that I don't agree with, I instantly formulate a path in my mind of logical discussion points or arguments, for lack of a better word, that I could see that I would reasonably assume would help lead them to see another side of an issue. This very brief experience over the weekend leads me to doubt that more than I ever have in the past.
Well, with this person or in general?
Well,
because
with this person
you're
for sure, and
enough.
all the people that he represents, and there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of people.
But if there really was evidence there, you would want to know it. You would listen. Hey,
I would, but it is November 30th. 27 days later, and there's no evidence been presented.
Well, that's because there isn't any.
Well, I mean, so you're not really the person I'm talking about, right? So maybe you can help me with this. I mean, maybe this will be interesting for the people listening. How can we get through to some of these? Because here's the thing I'm a little bit concerned about. When all is, I know how things are going to turn out. By one way or the other, on the 20th, Trump is going out of the White House. I don't give a shit what anybody says.
And he says that, by the way. Let me just throw this in here.
Go ahead.
In the latest step towards a concession, President Trump has said he will leave the White House if the Electoral College vote for Joe Biden. He was answering a question during his annual Thanksgiving call to the U.S. military.
It's going to be a very hard thing to concede because we know there was massive fraud. I'm going to go with another question. Go ahead.
So if the Electoral College does elect President-elect Joe Biden, are you not going to leave this building?
Just so you, certainly I will. Certainly I will. And you know that.
So, how would we know that?
Well, he's either saying, I'm going to do the right thing and leave, or they're going to take me out of here. But either way, I'm not going to, hole up in the closet. I'm going to be gone. So,
yeah, okay. Well, that's good news. I mean, I'm glad he's going to go. I mean, I don't want to see the president of the United States taken out at gunpoint as much as I
don't think that's going to happen.
Trump taken somewhere at gunpoint, but not out of the White House. So, that's good news, I guess. But
I think.
What about the people he leaves behind? What about the person I talked to over the holiday? What about how do we get through to them that this has all been bullshit? Everything about this every single thing about this election fraud stuff is nonsense. How do we get them to understand that?
Well, I don't have an answer to that.
Do you understand that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's there is no massive voter fraud. Are there isolated cases of fake ballots? Of course. Is that unique to this election? No. Trump was planting the seed from day one that there would be an attempt to remove him from office illegally by voter fraud methods. And maybe it's because he knew he was going to lose. I don't know. Maybe he was planting the seed and setting the stage in case he did lose. But he did. And he lost because more people voted for Biden. I mean, that's why he lost. But what I think is, the only thing I can speculate is that... It sounds
so reasonable when somebody says it in this context. Hey, you know why you lost? Because more people voted for Biden and because the Electoral College he lost in the states that, it's going to be exactly the same as it was last time, only opposite. Instead, he's going to lose by the same amount of Electoral College votes as he won by before.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't speak for everybody. I recognize there is a Trump supporter out there, the Trump supporters out there that are the avid supporters, his group that will just latch onto everything that he says. But I think what Trump is doing basically is maybe setting the stage for a 2024 campaign. And maybe he's got to keep fueling the fire to keep his base there and active and alive to come back. I mean, think about it. If he can continue this narrative for the next 4 years, and I don't know that he can, but if his base thinks that the election was stolen from him and therefore stolen from them and all the things that they believe he represented for them, then will that be enough for them to carry the torch 4 years later? I don't know, maybe.
Let me ask you a question. How do you think anybody in this country could come away from this, and not just the last 4 years, but let's call it the last 6 years of Trump and his nonsense, and come away believing that he somehow loves the United States of America. Do you feel that at all?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that that's what people feel about him, that he loves America. Maybe they do, but is that the thing that they love about him?
That's certainly one of the things. So here's the question I asked. How does a person with the moral profile that a lot of Trump voters have, and so we'll not try to broad brush it, but let's just call it the religious right. How do people with that type of profile bring themselves to vote for or endorse or speak in favor of Donald Trump, who is an amoral piece of shit?
Well, I mean, there's a lot there.
And the answer I got was because he loves our country.
That's one person's answer.
But that one person, I guarantee it, is representing, again, the technical term is probably assload of people.
Well, you know,
certainly
listen,
a great deal of people that fit that profile.
There's a lot there, though. But I think
right.
You're trying to make the connection that the Trump supporters think that Trump loves our country so much that therefore that's why we support Trump. And then the assumption is that Biden doesn't love our country. And I don't know that an honest Trump supporter would say that Biden doesn't love our country. There's certainly a million different ways that they differ on how to, improve this country, but I don't know that that's the assumption. I think here's what I really think it is. I think that more people view Trump as an isolationist because he uses the phrase America first. And then, but I think a lot of people on the left, and rightfully so, in my opinion, recategorize that as America alone. You know what I'm saying? So yes, you can want great things for America and you can come up with ideas that you think are great for America, but if it ends up being America alone, well, that's not a good strategy. And so I think there's a group within Trump's base that do want to be America alone. And maybe that's where it comes from. It's just reading between the lines.
Want to be America alone, huh? I guess. I mean, I think that over the years, have you ever seen, and again, this will be a little bit of an ageist remark on my part against you, but do you remember ever seeing, before all of this, before Trump and all of this, do you ever remember seeing stickers or posters that say U.S. Like the U.S. out of the United Nations? You ever remember that was kind of get the United States out of the United Nations? I think that a great deal of these people that currently now align themselves with Trump or this whatever this is, are those same people that always felt that, right? And they're like, hey, get the U.S. out of the United Nations. The world is sucking us dry somehow. We're paying for NATO, blah, 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 blah. And not really understanding how much we benefit from NATO and things that we do pay for. And so that really, for me, it doesn't matter whether the other NATO allies pay the same amount as the United States. We're thousands of times bigger than those countries. Our GDP is bigger. Our economy is bigger. We have way more people than any of them. So who gives a shit?
But here's the truth of the matter, the way I see it.
Go ahead.
Both sides have done a great job at convincing their base that their way of life and the things that they hold valuable will be taken from them should the other side win. And that's really what I think it boils down to, and that's why the country is so divided on the things that they cherish, because both sides have convinced their base that, hey, I'm the guy that's keeping, those things from being taken from you on both sides. So for the base that believes, and this goes back to the whole issue that people need to think for themselves, and it's not just the two boxes, it's not the red pill or the blue pill. You got to move all the noise and move out the bullshit.
It's a Matrix
It
reference.
is the Matrix. But that's the bottom line, Mike. I think that it boils down to that it's a competition between, what am I going to lose if the other side wins? And therefore, if Trump keeps saying, he doesn't even have to say it, right? Those people already lost. This was the Super Bowl to them, and they lost. And therefore, what have they got? They can complain that it wasn't a fair game, or they can come back and try again next year. I mean, that's basically what you've got.
Well, I think that I'm going to be fascinated to see how things go after the inauguration. Just to see what these same people continue to say. I'd be interested in that. And so, I will say that it was an interesting experience.
I'm sure it created an interesting family dynamic.
Well, it got under control before it got out of control, and then there were group photos and stuff involved after that. So it just moved on. I don't know. Frankly, I mean, I hope for me, I don't care. I got a bad feeling though that for the other person involved in this and the people in my family unit that might support him, that I don't know. I mean, I hope it wasn't a deal killer for further experiences. I mean, I tried to stay. I didn't start this, so. And I didn't really even end it. So it was more the spouses getting involved going, hey, this is not the time.
Well, I personally think that a lot of that rhetoric is going to go away after the 20th. I think Trump is already tweeting less. In fact, we should probably drop him from our Twitter feed, but, or at least after the 20th. But, I think it's going to go away. I mean, he will leave, on the 20th. And, I think a lot of the steam will be out of there. And so I think as a result, the base will calm down too. It's not going to go away. It doesn't change the fact that the country is divided. But, I think that stuff will ultimately calm down.
I want to try. Let me see if I can make this happen. Hold on.
What were you rocking out to?
I want to try and play you something that this is not a Trump supporter. This is, this is a Democrat who is not preaching, what's the word? What are we supposed to do? She's not talking kumbaya. She's not talking everybody get together.
Unite us?
Yeah, she's not talking about unite us. So let me see if I can make this happen.
About reaching across the aisle to these absolutely traitorous motherfuckers, I'm going to lose my goddamn mind. These people are putting American democracy on the chopping block just to retain their own power. We're supposed to find middle ground with these opportunists who would rather have the Civil War coup than admit they did everything they could to rig the election and still lost? Joe Biden won. You corrupt, self-serving, seditious, traitorous monsters. You know it. I know it. The courts know it. You just don't care. You won all those Senate seats on the same goddamn ballots you claim are fraudulent, but you would rather keep King Baby in charge at the cost of America than follow the law facilitating a peaceful transfer of power. And we're supposed to just roll over and let you just hope and pray we win the Georgia runoff just to have the opportunity to get anything done in this country to actually help the American people? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Who's that? AOC?
That's not AOC, but that's a little tribute to AOC at the end there, right? That's one of her Senate or one of her congressional speeches has that I don't think so phrasing just like that. So.
I can't stand her. She makes me want to stab pencils in my ear.
Huh?
She makes me want to stab my ear with pencils.
How about her? What did you think? What did that make you think? Did she sound like a crazy person or unreasonable?
Oh, I thought it was a joke. Yeah. Was that real?
That's her real opinion about what she thinks about cozying up with the incredibly corrupt Republican Senate that I've been talking about through this whole process.
Well, I thought it was.
Fuck 'em.
I thought it was
we're
funny.
Not doing that.
I thought it was funny, but it certainly is opposite of the approach Biden wants them to take. He's trying to be the uniter. He's trying to reach across the aisle and be a president for all Americans. So he better get his people in check.
No, she's not buying that. She's not going for that. She's like,
hey, I keep saying there needs to be a third party, and I think that's going to come in sooner rather than later, and in a different way than we've talked about. It's not going to come from a completely other party like the Libertarian Party. It's going to come from within the Democratic Party when they break off and the progressives get so pissed off that Biden is too much of a centrist. That's probably what's going to happen first.
He's going to be too much of a centrist. That's why I can't. I mean, some of the other conversations that I've heard recently around this with the people we've been talking about and others is that he's some kind of crazy communist or something. I don't get it. 47 years in government service. Not an inkling that he's some kind of communist. I just don't
and the
know where that
Democratic,
comes from.
the people with a brain on the Democratic Party obviously realized that. They knew they couldn't get behind Bernie because he wouldn't have won, and they knew that Joe was the only big name they had to defeat Trump.
The only sure thing, that's for sure. I mean, I think there were other, I think there were other ways to go. I mean, I personally had hoped that Biden wasn't getting in. He got in late, and I was hoping he wasn't going to get in.
Well, it's a good thing for you he did.
I guess. He did accomplish the one thing I asked of him, and like I said in our last
to not die?
podcast. Yeah.
Don't die before November 3rd.
Unseat Cheeto Voldemort. Just get him out of there.
But he
did. So what else you got?
Just some various sound bites of what's to take place, but I don't know which one this is.
Have you considered, for the sake of national unity,
This is Lester Holt, by the way. I don't know if we have to give him credit for stealing his clip.
Electing or nominating a Republican, someone who voted for President Trump?
Yes, and we still have a lot more appointments to make. I want this country to be united. The purpose of our administration is, once again, united. We can't keep this virulent political dialogue going.
So, that's his message. I think it's a wise message. And, the AOCs of the world are going to have to understand that you're going to have to talk with people on the other side. It's the way it works.
I don't think so.
They say, by the way, that's why Hillary never won, is because the way that she would deliver her remarks, and she sounded so condescending, and she sounded like a nagging wife, and every husband with a nagging wife was like, I can't listen to that in office for the next 4 years. So I don't know that AOC's style is very effective.
We all hated Hillary. I don't know what else to say about Hillary. Her and Donald were pretty good friends, before this.
They were like New York buddies.
Run. Yeah. So I don't know. I hope things are good after the inauguration. I mean, I hope listen, politics is the big thing that's ripe for interruption. Right.
That's true. Yeah, that's a very good point. I think what was the other thing that was in the news? Supreme Court related.
They've been quiet, huh?
Well, but didn't they make a ruling? I think it was a church service thing, because there's all these restrictions on gatherings, but I think they ruled in favor of a church that they could congregate and gather, and they didn't have to. I'm not sure if it was the capacity limits or if it was just to be open at all. But of course, there was a lot of that in the news where, here we go, Trump's Supreme Court. You can see how they're going to rule for the next lifetime.
Part of the argument that I had with the family member was that, really what he was saying was, hey, let's let it get to the Supreme Court, then we'll see. And I'm like, none of the shit is going to the Supreme Court.
I think even Trump said that. I think there was somewhere over the weekend where he said he doesn't think this is going to make it to the Supreme Court.
No, but he did.
No, he did in the past. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. He thought.
I think he's realizing now he doesn't stand a chance.
Well, there's no way Amy Comey Banana Fana is gonna take on a Trump voting thing and then swing it in his favor, because
which I tried to tell you all along, by the way, when you lost your shit over it.
Well, I wanted her to recuse herself, right? So, I
tried to tell you that there was no way she was going to overturn it, so let her vote and go on record of saying he didn't win.
Well, we'll never know, because they're not going to take up any of these things.
Yeah, I agree. There's not enough there.
There's nothing voter related that's going to hit the Supreme Court.
It's like COVID. It's a big nothing burger.
Oh, man. There's no there.
Right.
That's it, folks. We've got all of the trick media words. It's a big nothing burger. It's there's no there. Amy Comey Bananarama.
Do you want to hear more of
yes
of Biden on his first 100 days?
Yes.
These are, we can kind of go through these as much or as little as you want.
Tell me about day one of the White House and day 1 through 100, your first 100 days. What are your priorities going to be?
These clips are like 100 minutes, so we'll just see how much you can tolerate.
Blaze through 'em.
On those first days?
Some of it's going to depend on the kind of cooperation I can or cannot get from the United States Congress. But I made a commitment in the first 100 days. I will send a immigration bill to the United States Senate with a pathway to citizenship for over 11 million undocumented people in America. I will also...
I found that interesting, by the way, because I hadn't previously heard or understood that was maybe something on his priority list on day one.
Well, here's what I can tell you. If you want to rally the Trump base, just tell them you're going to set up a pathway to citizenship for 11 million illegal aliens. That, I mean, if you say that before the election's over,
he just said it.
Then but the election's over.
Oh,
He can
right.
say whatever the fuck he wants to say now, right?
So I'm not wrong. I didn't miss that. He kind of glossed over it.
No, had he said that prior to election day, it would have been a catastrophe, right? But really, it's the only right thing to do anyway. So,
yeah,
the whole immigration thing is a red herring. You know, if you could just think back, if any of us could remember, go back 6 years ago, immigration wasn't even on the table. Nothing about it. DACA was rumming along. Nobody was
before
talking
Trump made
about
it an issue in building the wall.
When he walked down the fucking stairs and announced his thing, he's the one. Because look, I'm
maybe
not
he was
saying
fishing at that point. Trump was like throwing shit out there. All right, immigration, see if they bite.
I'm sure he was.
Grab the pussy, see if they bite. You know, whatever I can get these people going.
I can't go there. So I think it's so sad because I think that it disrupted the process that was starting to take place regarding immigration. It's, we'll see now. I mean, whatever. I mean, here's a prediction for you. Once Trump is out and Biden's in, then all you're going to hear on Fox News and OAN and all of Sinclair Broadcasting and all of that right-wing horseshit is how how Latin Americans are flooding the border. That's all they're going to talk about because now that Trump is gone and his hard line on immigration is gone, they're going to be flooding the border. And, that scare tactic will continue the whole time. Oh,
it'll be interesting to see how much of the Trump rhetoric the Republican base that's left behind will carry the water. We'll see. But, like you said, it wasn't really a thing before 6 years ago, so we'll see how far they carry it. But I
think the honeymoon's over with Trump and Fox.
Yeah, I think definitely it is. But, listen, here's the common sense. You can't have open borders, but you got...
What is that?
What?
In your picture. Oh, it's gone now. That was your... you can't see it on your side?
No, what?
Oh, that was your sound curtain. Oh. It was all of a sudden in the picture.
My camera's going in and out. But but it does make sense to just let's grant these people a citizenship and get it over with. What are we doing?
Yeah, what do you think? It's 11 million people.
They're part of the culture. They're part of the society. Let's make it happen already. But I just thought it was interesting, and I hadn't heard him say that, so I guess I wasn't wrong. I guess I didn't miss it. Let's see what else.
They'll be moving to do away with some of the, I think, very damaging executive orders that have significantly impacted on making the climate worse and making us less healthy, from methane to a whole range of things the president has done.
I am personally producing a lot of methane, so I hope he doesn't, put restrictions on me.
Let's stop down for a second. I know we're in the, I don't know.
We're into tomorrow.
Coming up on the 2-hour mark here. What do you think is gonna, this is another show, but this is something I'd like us to think about and talk about a little bit. We talked a little bit about it. Are you worried at all about the climate stuff? Do you have is it just too much on top of everything else to even think about? Do you think that we got issues we need to deal with? Do you think we'll be able to deal with them better with a Biden administration? Or is the whole thing just a fucking waste of time and we're just waiting for the seas to rise up and flood?
Yes,
flood
and
Venice.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. Venice would be good to get rid of. No, just kidding. I think there's a lot there, but I think I don't think you can take the position of Trump. You can't ignore it. And the climate is changing. And like I've said, the question is the climate changing? And there's a faction on the right that for a long time, maybe they still do, dismisses that premise. So then you kind of know who you're dealing with. You can't ignore what you see and feel around us. The climate is changing. Is it man-made? Don't know. But that's not really the question. The question is, what can we do about it? And I do believe that it is true that over the course of our planet's history, we've had these cycles before, but there weren't humans on it. And humans can't live in extreme temperatures. And so if we want to continue to be around, if the human race wants to continue to be around for the next several hundred and several thousand years, and we recognize that this is happening, what can we do about it? So I don't think, to me, it makes any sense to argue the politics of it, which is, is it or isn't it, or who caused it or whatever. It's here. So we can either accept it and do nothing, or we can do something about it. That's number one. I think the real issue is, what can we do about it, and how?
Do you think it's going to cost something to do something about it?
Well, here's what I would like to see.
And what costs are you willing to pay?
I think it needs to be like this. I don't like to see restrictions and regulations put in place without innovation. So take a guy like Elon Musk. I think I heard him say one time, if every single auto manufacturer in the world, this was a comment that's maybe a couple of years old, but if every single auto manufacturer in the world today transformed all of their factories and started making electric vehicles, it would take something like 20 years to have all of the vehicles on the road be cycled out and be converted to electric vehicles. So basically, if you think you want to have carbon neutral now, that's not even possible with today's technology. It would take 20 years, if that were to happen, to have no more gasoline vehicles on the road, and something like that. Maybe those dates aren't exactly right. But the point is, when you have, governments and people like Gavin Newsom in California who have said, come 2035, we will not allow gasoline vehicles to be sold into the state. Hey, that's a noble thing to say, but do we have the technology to do that? And by declaring that, by setting the deadline first, does that spark innovation? I don't think so. I think that people who have these ideas and create this technology, there's enough to motivate them now to do it. And if they could do it, they would do it. So that's what worries me. I'm behind the ideas. I think that's great. I don't need to or want to drive a gas guzzling vehicle. You drive it because that's what you need to do what you're doing. Whether it's hauling heavy loads, whether it's hauling multiple passengers, whether it's something that needs to go further than 300 miles, like delivery vehicles or service type vehicles, that technology doesn't exist. And I know that there's not enough production today to get us there in 2035. Can that be changed? Maybe. But so that's the kind of shit that worries me. None of the discussion, none of the ideas. We got to be bold. I'm not afraid of asking bold questions. I'm not afraid of having bold conversations. It's what we do about it. So to answer your question, is from the climate stuff, is it better to have Biden? I don't disagree with that, especially the stance that Trump has taken. What we do about it, that's, we'll have to see. But I don't think it hurts to have him being the guy delivering the message.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, it appears to me from what little bit of looking around I've done, that there's not going to be a silver bullet. Even reaching carbon neutral status doesn't solve the problem, because that doesn't take the carbon that's already in the atmosphere out. We've been pumping, something like 40 trillion gigatons of carbon into the fucking atmosphere every year for quite a while. It's not. So we'll have to get carbon neutral at some point, but then we also, along the way, and we can't wait till because like you said, carbon neutral is 20 years out. We got to start working on how to get the carbon out of the atmosphere that we've already put there. And so I think these are some of the more important questions that should really be dealt with. I think that that's why I think politics is ripe for disruption. We need to disrupt the stupid limited timeline thinking of our politicians. I don't think Biden's the answer, but he's not the problem either. He won't actively do anything to make it worse, but he's not going to be able to solve it either.
But you also, and yeah, right. And I think part of that has to be recognizing I'm getting political and I don't mean to, but I think why a lot of these talks fall apart is because a lot of the arguments are made on political lines and not necessarily, the right decisions going forward. For example, the Paris Climate Accord, should we not? All these restrictions that we talk about that the United States will impose on itself. But we are actually not the biggest carbon polluter. It's China and it's India. So it doesn't matter what the fuck we do. We still live on the same rock under the same umbrella. So they've got to do their part or all this means nothing. So I think that's part of, solving the problem is, and maybe that is an argument for a more global, connectivity and being part of the UN, is that we're all trying to figure this out together and it's not just the U.S. alone. Because it's not a U.S. alone solution, that's for sure.
Well, certainly pulling out of something like the Paris Accord is just stupid. I mean, that's just isolationist pandering to his base. Of course, that's not the right thing to do. That's just silly.
But staying in it did nothing either because they weren't doing their part. That's the issue.
Nobody can force us to do anything that we perceive as detrimental to the security or the well-being of the United States, whether we're in the Paris Accords or not. So, and let me clue you in on something too. And for all of our listeners, the Paris Accords aren't going to solve this problem. I mean, it's going to take 1,000 solutions. Okay. It's going to take 1,000 solutions all happening simultaneously.
Right.
To do anything. And that's what people need to get their head around. You have to stop doing the things that are contributing to this issue. And then you have to really, and here's the thing, tearing down science and scientists and all that they represent is not the right thing. And that's why it's good that at least for the time being, fucktard is out of the house.
But it's I agree with that. And if we could fly on a carbon neutral airplane, that would be great. But we don't have that capability. Maybe I think they're developing hydrogen technology again, which is kind of freaky. But I think the bottom line is this:
well, how you make a carbon neutral airplane? How? By developing a fuel that comes from carbon, and that way the carbon that the engine from that plane puts out. Look, electrical planes never going to be a thing. That's never going to happen. That's just.
But is the issue that?
But here's the thing: if the fuel that is going into those engines is using up the same amount of carbon as the engines are putting out, that's carbon neutral. And so, those are the things we have to. It's not about taking the planes out of the sky. It's about getting a handle on the energy industry that would actively work against carbon neutral fuels, because that's not in their best interest.
But isn't the real issue, I mean, obviously you in a perfect world, you wouldn't have any type of polluting, whether it's, how you make the fuels or the output of the fuel consumption. But isn't the real issue that we just have too much of it? So again, back to my COVID master plan, if we just knock off more of the population and we just have less polluting, isn't that a way to solve the problem? Have we had enough for today?
Dr. Goebbels. I don't know what to tell you about that. All right. Yeah, that's good. Hey, I missed the podcast last week.
Yeah, I missed it too. We're back on track, everybody.
We're back on track.
Thanks for your concerns. And, it was a blast.
Happy holidays. We're in it. So hopefully everybody got their fill of turkey and stuff over the weekend.
We're in it.
I know I've had enough. Yeah. All right,
everyone.
See ya.
That's
Thanks,
it for
everybody.
Today. All right. Bye.